The whole damn family is villainous motto novel 205,513. We were a family of villains, the kind who exist only to do evil, racking up a body count to make the heroes shine all the brighter. In the end, our pre-written fate was to be left for dead on the streets, objects of public scorn. My father was the corrupt Lord Treasurer, having siphoned off half the kingdom's treasury. The king had been eyeing his head for a long time. My mother, a ruthless woman from a lesser noble house, had clawed her way into marriage over a few dead bodies. My brother, the High General, was the capital's most infamous rake, a bloodthirsty tyrant who held the city's garrison in his iron fist. And then there was me, freshly reincarnated into this world, a useless girl with no skills to speak of, except for the voice screaming inside my head. Dad, Mom, Damien. If we don't get our act together, the heroes are going to crush us. I'm doomed. The moment I arrived in this world, I knew. I had been reborn into a family of archetypal villains, the dark mirror to the story's heroic protagonist. The first 20 years of my life were a whirlwind of silk and gold. The next 20 were slated to end in a variety of uniquely gruesome ways for each of us. I had just come of age when the royal decree arrived, a dual marriage proposal. My father, Lord Valerius, was a man of immense power, his hands on the economic pulse of the entire kingdom. The other bride-to-be was Lady Trista, daughter of the Lord Justiciar. A respectable family, they called them, a kinder way of saying they were broke. Though Trista's station was modest, she was hailed as the most brilliant literary mind in the capital city of Ethelgard. Her reputation far outshone mine, which is how we both ended up in this mess. The king, in a show of feigned respect for my father, offered me the first choice, the crown prince or the Lord Marshal. My father leaned close, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. "Choose whoever you like, my darling girl." I fell silent, my mind racing. The prince and the Lord Marshal are both obsessed with Trista. If I marry the prince, he'll despise me but fear my father. Publicly, he'll be courteous. Privately in the palace, I'll be treated worse than a servant. He'll take Trista as his favored mistress anyway, and when the time is right, he'll probably have me disposed of, walled up in some forgotten tower to make way for his true love. If I choose the Lord Marshal, I'll be a lonely wife in a cold castle. He'll immediately request a post on the furthest border of the kingdom. A few years later, he'll return with a woman who looks suspiciously like Trista and demand I raise her son as my own. And all the while, he'll be acting as Trista's devoted, lovesick puppy, lavishing her with gifts bought with my family's money. Either choice is a death sentence. I'm utterly screwed. My eyes widened and I shot my father a desperate look, trying to signal my panic. "Father, Dad!" A tremor ran through him, his eyes instantly bloodshot. He straightened up, his voice strained but firm. "Your Majesty, forgive my impertinence, but my daughter is unruly. This union is simply not possible." The king's pleasant facade cracked. "The crown prince and the Lord Marshal are the finest young men in this kingdom," he said, his tone turning to ice. "If neither is good enough for your daughter, Lord Valerius, who exactly did you have in mind for her?" Panic made my father reckless. "My daughter is slow. I had already arranged a betrothal for her, you see." A cold, humorless laugh escaped the king's lips. "Don't play games with me. You were given a choice and you refused it. Very well, I shall choose for you. She will marry my son, the crown prince. She will be his princess." Defeated, my father could only prostrate himself in thanks before being dismissed. When it was Trista's turn, she and the prince exchanged secretive, longing glances. She, too, chose the prince, though she would only be his official mistress, a lady of the court. Her father, the Lord Justiciar, was ecstatic. "A blessing from the heavens! My daughter must serve the prince well in his household." Only the Lord Marshal, Gideon, cast one last mournful look at Trista before striding away. His shoulders slumped in defeat. The news that I, Cassia Valerius, and Lady Trista were to be married to the prince on the same day spread through Ethelgard like wildfire, fanning the flames of gossip. Not that any of the noble ladies ever wanted to associate with me. They all flocked around Trista like moths to a flame. She had the reputation, the grace. She could recite some mournful poem and earn a roomful of applause. As for me, my parents always said, "Why bother with lutes and watercolors? Those are skills for entertainers. Our daughter has no need for them." So just like my brother, I was branded one of the capital, gilded fools. The way home, the whispers were impossible to ignore. "Look, there's Cassia Valerius, dripping with gold again. Does she intend to wear the entire treasury on her person? So vulgar. What does she know of elegance? She's just a spoiled brat with a rich father. Look at her, trailing a half-dozen servants. You'd think she was a queen. Even the queen isn't that ostentatious. A shame, really. With that character, she might become a princess, but she'll never be a queen. Prince prefers women of substance. He would never fall for an empty-headed doll like her. Every time I stepped outside, it was the same story. I knew my reputation was in the gutter, but I refused to be shamed for my fashion. And what of their beloved Trista? The woman was about to marry the crown prince, and she still wandered around in a plain white linen dress and a simple silver pin. It was pathetic, yet the capital's elite praised it as the height of sophisticated minimalism. Leaving the palace, I had muttered loud enough for her to hear. Dressed in white like that, is she attending a wedding or a funeral? Her retort, delivered in that sickeningly sweet tone of hers, came swiftly. I love this white gown as I love a pure soul. It is a constant reminder to remain true to oneself, untainted by the gaudy trends of the world. This was going to be unbearable. The thought of sharing a roof with that master of passive aggression made me lose my appetite. That night, my parents and my brother, Damien, were all too worried to eat. Damien, ever the cavalier, slammed his fist on the table. Seriously, Dad. You couldn't just say she was already spoken for. Do you have any idea the filth they're spewing about her out there? Mother's face was a mask of frustration. If it were anyone else, we could just have them disappear. Before her marriage, she was infamous for eliminating several rivals within her own family to secure her position. Talk of murder never fazed her. Damien nodded eagerly. A knife in the dark solves a lot of problems. Better dead than miserable under the prince's roof. I'm with Mom on this one. He turned to me, his eyes filled with a rare spark of pity. Poor Kasia, so young and already being set up as the unloved wife. He'd picked up that particular turn of phrase from me. He was using it perfectly now. My father looked like he was about to explode. Have you both lost your minds? He roared. We're talking about the Crown Prince and the Lord Marshal. Who exactly do you plan on assassinating? And he'd better not treat her like that. He wouldn't dare. Tears welled in my eyes. I couldn't say it out loud, so I screamed it in my head. Of course he'd dare. I'm not just the unloved wife, I'm the villainess. The evil counterpoint to his perfect Trista. I'm her stepping stone, the ultimate sacrificial pawn. No matter what I do, I'm destined to die. The mood at the table grew even heavier. I stared at the feast of roasted meats and exotic fruits before me, and for the first time in my life, it all tasted like ash. Damien slammed the dining room doors shut, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Then let's do it. Let's start a rebellion. Father becomes king. Then let's see who dares to bully Kasia. My parents said nothing. Only I, the one who knew the script, sighed internally. The wedding has to happen. Refusing is treason. The king is already looking for an excuse to destroy our family. This is just the beginning. Once I'm married, they'll send Damien to the frontier, where he'll be betrayed and take a dagger in the back. With me trapped and my brother dead, our family will be defenseless lambs to the slaughter. We're all going to die, my brother's breath hitched. My mother's eyes grew as cold and sharp as daggers. My father seemed to reach a decision, snapping a pair of ivory chopsticks in his hand. Rebellion it is, he declared, his voice a low growl. Anyone who dares to harm my Kasia will not live to see another dawn. We spent the rest of the night plotting. The plan was simple. I would marry into the prince's household and act as their eyes and ears on the inside. We would strike before they even knew what was happening. We would embrace our roles, understand the villain, become the villain, surpass the villain. We would solve this problem the way villains do. Kasia, my father said, his eyes burning with intensity. Once you are in that palace, do not play the part of the meek, forgiving wife. Be as wicked as you can be. We don't have much time, so make every moment count. That's right, Damien chimed in. If he gives you any trouble, just hit him. You might not be a warrior, but surely you can handle that pampered prince, can't you? A room full of master villains, all looking at me as if I were a fragile little flower. A fire lit within me. I'll try, I said, a grin spreading across my face. I think I can manage. Honestly, being a villain might be bad for one's public image, but damn, it felt good. On the day of the wedding, 2 grand carriages proceeded to the prince's residence. My dowry was an extravagant procession of 128 chests, overflowing with silks, jewels, and gold. My mother fussed at the sidelines, trying to cram even more into them. Oh, the prince's palace is a den of vipers. My sweet girl has never known such hardship. By contrast, Trista's dowry was pitiful, a few pieces of jewelry, barely enough to fill 32 small chests. As our carriages rolled through the city, merchants and commoners alike chattered. Now that's a dowry fit for a princess. She must be impossibly rich. Compared to that, the other one's dowry is just embarrassing. So shabby. We're helped from our carriages at the same time. Through the delicate silk of my fan, I saw Trista's face twist with envy. Her expression softened only when we entered the palace and the crown prince, Alaric, immediately took her hand. "Worry," he murmured to her, loud enough for me to hear. "Now that you're here, I won't let anyone make you suffer." They looked like a pair of blissful newlyweds. I was just the third wheel, an awkward, overdressed obstacle. Still, during the ceremony, protocol dictated that I take precedence. The prince had to show me respect, at least in public. In private, of course, it was another story. That night, Prince Alaric didn't even bother stopping by my chambers. He walked straight to the West Wing, to the rooms prepared for his beloved Trista. My personal matron, Lyra, was wringing her hands. "Your Highness, this is an outrage, a breach of all decorum. If the prince doesn't spend his wedding night with you, what will the servants think tomorrow? That woman in the West Wing will be walking all over you." Matron Lyra had always been blunt and fiery back at our estate, which was precisely why Mother had sent her with me. She was here to make sure I wasn't bullied. "She's not some common wench I can drag out by the hair, matron. Am I supposed to go catch them in the act? You worry too much, that's why you're getting wrinkles. Let's all get some rest. We have a big day tomorrow. The crown prince spurning his bride on their wedding night. We have to make sure the entire city hears about it." I pulled off my heavy veil and wiped away my makeup. Even from my chambers in the East Wing, I could hear the celebrations in the West Wing. The prince had even set off fireworks for Trista. He had finally married the woman of his dreams. I was just the collateral damage in their great love story. The sky outside was lit up, and servants scurried back and forth to the West Wing with pitchers of hot water. One didn't need much imagination to guess what was happening. Meanwhile, I stretched out on the massive, empty bed and drifted off to sleep. What was the point of confronting him tonight? The prince's palace was crawling with his spies. Making a scene would just be another mark against the evil villainess, making him feel even more protective of the wronged Trista. It would gain me nothing but his anger. Since he wouldn't give me face, I had no intention of giving him any either. This scandal needed to be public. The next morning, before the sun was up, I had my maids dress me and apply makeup that made my eyes look red-rimmed and swollen from a night of weeping. "S'go, let's go," I chirped. "Time to go tattle." The city awoke. I went straight to the royal palace. I knelt outside the king's audience hall, begging for an audience. At this point in the story, the king was still wary of my family's power. Before I even saw him, I started to weep, a gut-wrenching, soul-shattering cry that echoed through the marble halls. I had also ordered my entire dowry to be brought with me, a glittering caravan of treasure that paraded through the city for all the nobles and commoners to see. It was a display of wealth that would make even the king jealous. When he heard I had arrived with my dowry in tow, he received me at once, not even waiting to properly arrange his robes. The moment he asked what was wrong, I looked up at him, the picture of misery. I would rather give this entire dowry away to the poor of this city than suffer such humiliation in the prince's household. My ragged sobs, I painted a picture of utter despair. The king's head began to throb. "Summon the prince at once." He boomed. "To have the princess come to me alone on her first day as a wife, this is disgraceful." When Prince Alaric arrived, fresh red marks adorned his pale neck. A little trophy from Trista, no doubt meant to provoke me. In his haste, he hadn't bothered to cover them. The king saw and his face turned purple with rage. "You are the crown prince. Look at the state of you. You humiliate your wife on your very first day. What do you think the court will say? What will the people say?" The king laid into him, and Alaric could only stammer. "It's not I, but I just kept crying." No matter what the king said, I cried, letting my sobs fill every pause. Finally, when I had exhausted myself, the king's tirade ceased. He said, his voice softer, "Take your dowry and go home. Be a good wife to the prince. You cannot speak of giving it all away. What would people think?" He eyed the chests of gold. "Besides, such wealth is better used to enrich the prince's own household." Punished the prince and shot a warning glance at Trista, who had followed him in, reminding her to remember her place. The matter was temporarily settled, and my dowry was ceremoniously escorted back to the prince's residence. The moment we were out of the king's sight, Alaric violently ripped his hand from mine, his earlier meekness vanishing. "Think I don't know what you're doing, Kasia," he hissed, venom dripping from every word. "You did this deliberately to make Trista miserable. You embarrassed me in front of my father. Do you think that will make your life any? Ranted for another minute before taking Trista's hand and storming off, leaving me standing alone in the palace courtyard. My eyes were still red. Well, a villain's got to do what a villain's got to do, right? If I just swallowed every insult and never caused any trouble, what kind of villain would I be? Of all the things the prince threatened me with, one phrase stuck in my mind. Embarrassed me. As I left, the king was heading to his morning council. I saw the kingdom's nobles milling about, my father among them. I couldn't shout, but I focused all my energy on a single, silent scream in my mind, Father. The prince wants a scandal. Give him one. I hoped my father, having already received a report from the servant I'd sent last night, would be on the same wavelength. By midday, it was the talk of the town. First, it was that the prince hadn't even visited his new bride's chambers. Then, the story evolved. On his wedding night, the prince had been cavorting not just with his new mistress, but with a whole host of courtesans, nearly sleeping through his morning summons to the king. The prince was publicly humiliated, and Trista's reputation took a hit right along with his. When I returned to the prince's residence, Alaric and Trista were already there. At lunch, a servant was sent to summon me. I arrived to find them sitting primly at the table, though the affection in their eyes was impossible to hide. Seeing me, Trista put on her gentle, caring mask. With her slender, pale hands, she personally ladled a bowl of soup for me. "Sister, you must be exhausted from this morning's ordeal," she said sweetly. "Here, the kitchen's chicken soup is wonderfully rich. You should have some." She had a strong stomach, I'll give her that. I'd heard people whispering on the street about how she'd led the prince astray on their wedding night. They call her a paragon of virtue. Sounds more like a brothel madam to me. Yet, here she was, playing the gracious hostess, as if she were the true princess. It was clear I'd never have a peaceful meal with her around. Glanced at the bowl. It was filled with chicken neck, the foulest part of the bird, disgusting. I said nothing, simply placing the bowl to the side. A servant saw my gesture and discreetly removed it. Prince Alaric's face darkened instantly. "The princess is perhaps a bit too pampered." Feigned surprise, her voice laced with hurt. "This soup was prepared by the palace's own chefs. Surely, sister, you don't suspect there's something wrong with it. You may not trust me, but you must trust the prince's staff." One smooth sentence, she accused me of being paranoid and insulting the entire household. But I wasn't about to let them trap me. I raised my sleeve to my eyes as if dabbing away a tear. "Forgive me, your highness. I have been deathly allergic to poultry since childhood." Lyra, ever my staunch ally, jumped in. "It's true. Her highness once ate a small piece of chicken as a child and was so ill it took 3 royal physicians half a month to nurse her back to health. The Valerius estate hasn't served poultry in years. It's shocking the prince's chefs would be so careless." Voice trembled, a single tear threatening to fall. "But I seem to recall that you, my lady, are particularly fond of white jade chicken porridge. It wouldn't be right for you to be deprived of your favorite dish just because of my unfortunate allergy, would it?" Trista was speechless. I did not. She looked like she was about to cry too, but her tears were always more beautiful than mine, the delicate, tragic tears of a frail damsel. It was a look that came from years of not eating enough red meat. "I truly did not know," she whispered. The prince, of course, fell for it completely. He took her hand, his eyes softening. "It was an oversight by the kitchen," he said gently. "From now on, the chicken porridge will be prepared separately for Lady Trista. We will not serve poultry at the main table. Must we make a scene over such a small matter?" He shot a venomous glare in my direction. The whispers in the city about his lack of virtue were, in his mind, my fault. He wasn't about to show me any kindness. "The princess and Lady Trista must learn to get along," he commanded. "Bring some peace to this household. The winter charity festival is approaching. Do not disgrace my name." Both Trista and I nodded in submission. After the meal, as usual, I was dismissed while the prince and Trista remained behind. They were the real couple. I was just an obstacle in the path of their love. Less than a month after I married into the prince's household, my brother Damien was dispatched to the northern frontier by royal decree. The journey itself was fraught with peril, and I was given no chance to see him off. The prince had buried me in managing the household's ledgers and affairs, while also decreeing that no one could leave the residence without his express permission, all under the guise of maintaining household tranquility. Furious, I stormed toward the prince's study to demand leave to bid my brother farewell. Before I even reached the door, I heard Trista's coquettish laughter from within. "The army is marching out," she cooed. I'm so glad you aren't going, Your Highness. I would have been worried sick. I could never bear to leave my Trista to languish in an empty palace, Alaric purred back. When I lead my own campaigns one day, I'll take you with me. We can have our own romantic tales on the battlefield. Oh, you must. I'd be branded a temptress, a siren leading the kingdom to ruin. I could never be that. Fine, fine. You won't be a temptress. You will be my queen. The border was a frozen hell, the war a grim and bloody affair, yet they spoke of it so lightly. And he dangled the title of queen in front of her with no regard for my presence. But their carelessness was my opportunity. I stepped up to the doorway and curtsied. Highness is most benevolent. With the northern war escalating, I wish to see my brother, the general, before he departs. Alaric frowned. The city is swarming with refugees. It is unseemly for you to be out and about. I knew it wouldn't be that easy. If politeness failed, I'd use force. Her Majesty the Queen recently invited me for a private chat. She was most curious about how things are run in your household and whether the staff is sufficient. Trista's face went pale. She remembered my last trip to the palace all too well and had no idea how much I'd just overheard. She tugged discreetly at the prince's sleeve, shaking her head. Annoyed, the prince waved a dismissive hand. Go, if you must, but behave yourself. And there is no need to visit my mother. I will speak to her myself. The end, he let me go. I saw my brother, but the words wouldn't come. It was Damien who did all the talking, his usual bravado tinged with concern. Remembering the script, I finally found my voice. Lord Marshal Gideon is in love with Trista. On the frontier, you must watch your back around him, especially your back. Make sure you always have someone trustworthy guarding you, brother. In the book, Lord Marshal Gideon stabs Damien in the back, steals his military achievements, and returns a war hero. And he does it all to prove his worth to Trista, playing the part of the devoted, tragic suitor to advance her story. This was the first time I had ever spoken the future out loud. My brother, however, just smirked with his usual arrogance. Don't you worry about me. When it comes to a real fight, he's no match for me. He's an infuriating, overconfident ass, but if he died, I don't know what I'd do. The tender moment of farewell was shattered when Damien flicked me on the forehead. You're the one I'm worried about. You're like a little quail in a den of wolves. Don't let that prince eat you alive. Winter deepened. The war in the north intensified. Swarms of starving refugees began to press against the capital's gates, but the king refused to let them in. The city gates were barred, leaving the desperate masses to beg and starve in the shadow of the city walls. Trista set up her soup kitchen inside the city. Dressed in an ethereal gown, her hair in an elaborate style, she basked in the praise of the city's residents. Of course, few people inside the walls were actually starving. They mostly came to receive a blessing from the benevolent future queen, and her stall was always thronged with people. I, on the other hand, changed into common clothes and opened my soup kitchen outside the city walls. It was more dangerous, but seeing the fields littered with the starving and the dead, it was impossible not to act. The moment I set up, a few well-dressed men approached. They were minor officials tasked with keeping the refugees from rioting. The leader dipped a ladle into my pot and took a taste. "Pa," he spat. "What is this? There's sand in it." He eyed me suspiciously, but I calmly continued spooning the gritty gruel into bowls. Every single bowl had sand mixed in. Hearing this, the other officials backed away. They weren't rich, but they weren't desperate enough to eat sand. They could always get a bowl of cheap, clean porridge at the other charity stall inside the city. Once they left, the real refugees began to crowd around. They didn't care if there was sand or dirt in the food. It was hot, and it was sustenance. I could still hear the officials muttering nearby. That's the princess, Cassia Valerius, the Lord Treasurer's daughter. Her family has always been like this, corrupt and stingy. Can you believe she's mixing sand into charity soup? Gods, they're drowning in money and they're still this cheap. Nothing like the lady inside the city. The one inside is better, but can you get any of her soup? No, we're stuck out here guarding these wretches. Haven't had a decent meal in weeks. No wonder they say the princess is nothing compared to Lady Trista, who put sand in soup for the poor. I ignored them, ladling out soup from dawn until dusk, and still, it wasn't enough. The number of refugees was growing. If the war in the north didn't end soon, this place was going to explode. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach. My brother had been gone for so long, and not a single letter had arrived. As I was packing up to return to the city, I saw a rider on a lathered horse thundering towards the palace, an urgent dispatch. The rider's banner was trimmed with white, the color of mourning. a white banner, an urgent message. I remembered the book's timeline. At this point, my brother. Something had happened to him. My legs were still shaking when I got back to the prince's residence. I grabbed the maids my family had sent with me and immediately dispatched them to gather news. Just then, Trista returned, her cheeks flushed, looking as if she'd spent a pleasant day in a garden rather than at a soup kitchen. "Sister, you'll never guess," she said, her voice bright with feigned excitement. "On my way back, I saw a royal messenger riding like the wind towards the palace. It must be major news from the front." She looked at me like a predator cornering its prey. "You've always held your position over my head, forcing me to bow and scrape." A cruel smile touched her lips. "I can't wait to see how you'll fight me when the Valerius family has lost its precious general. Without your family, without the prince's favor, how long do you think you can last in this palace, Kasia?" She was dropping all pretense. My brother, it must be true. He was gone. But I had warned him. My face remained a stony mask, but inside a storm was raging. I didn't even have the strength to fire back a retort. At that moment, Prince Alaric emerged to greet Trista. Her expression shifted instantly. "Highness," she purred, melting against him. "I'm so tired from today's charity work." She was soft and pliant in his arms, all traces of her earlier venom gone. "I had the kitchen make you a special porridge," she continued. "It's not like the soup for the masses. I had them simmer it for hours. It's smooth and rich. I know you're used to grand feasts, but I'm sure you'll appreciate this simple dish." Alaric played his part. "Then let us go and taste this special porridge." Cast a thoughtful glance at me. For weeks, he had paraded Trista in front of me, and for weeks I had shown no reaction. He almost seemed disappointed. It was as if I, his wife, had started treating him as if he were invisible. And how was the princess's day? He asked, a hint of challenge in his voice. "Charity work went smoothly, Your Highness. You need not concern yourself. But the gruel the refugees drink would surely offend your palate. You needn't trouble yourself over my bowl of soup." A flicker of frustration crossed his face. He wanted to see something else from me, jealousy, desperation, a complete breakdown, but he found nothing. I had never placed any hope in this man. I was done even pretending. My mind was consumed with one thought: how to contact my parents and find out what had really happened to Damien. We had a plan. What had gone wrong? As for fighting for the prince's affection, why would I fight for a man I didn't love? True power was what mattered, and I intended to seize it. The news came. My brother, Damien Valerius, had been killed in battle. My father draped our family estate in white mourning cloths and closed the doors to all visitors. The grief of losing his only son in his old age was too much. He collapsed in the middle of the king's court. When I finally went home, the entire estate was a sea of white linen and silent sorrow. I fainted several times, and in the end, I had to be practically carried back to the prince's residence by his guards. The king immediately began to dismantle my family. First, citing the war effort, he demanded my father fund the next campaign, but the royal treasury had been empty for years. There was no money. My father, frail and trembling, stood before the throne. "This old servant is useless," he wept. "I cannot procure the funds." King sneered. "The royal treasury may be empty, but I doubt the private vaults of my nobles are, Lord Valerius. Surely you can find the silver. If you cannot contribute to the kingdom, to our brave soldiers on the frontier, you will sorely test my patience." Father was dismissed. That same day, he was stripped of his title. The king gave him a deadline: produce the money, or his house would be seized and his family ruined. Trista was triumphant. She flaunted her victory in my face without restraint. "Your father has lost the king's favor. Your brother is dead. Let's see how much longer you can cling to your title in this palace, Kasia." She was treating me as if I were already a ghost. I had to repeat a silent mantra of patience to stop myself from slapping her. This was not the time to cause more trouble for my family. Trista even began moving my belongings from the east wing to her own, claiming them as hers. If I hadn't already filled my wing with our family's most worthless trinkets, she would have stripped it bare. The princess's residence became as cold and desolate as a prison. The servants, ever eager to curry favor with the powerful, abandoned me. All except for the loyal few my mother had sent with me. The others flocked to the west wing. I overheard them whispering, "The princess won't be a princess for much longer. You'd better get out while you can. The good positions in the west wing will be gone soon. It's only a matter of time before the mistress becomes the new princess. Don't be a fool." One evening, Prince Alaric appeared in my desolate east wing. He wrinkled his nose in disgust at the Spartan surroundings. It was the first time he had ever come to me at night. He dismissed the servants, looming over me. "I often wondered, Kasha," he said in a low drawl, "when would you finally break?" If he could hear my thoughts, he'd hear one word: psychopath. He grabbed my chin, forcing me to look at him. "Why are you always like this, Kasha? That same stony face, so cold, so utterly devoid of charm." He leaned closer, his breath hot on my cheek. "But I must admit I enjoy that pride of yours. Your head for me just once. Swear yourself to me and I will protect you. Even if your family is destroyed, I can ensure you live and live well. Do you know what happens to the women of fallen houses? They are sold to brothels, Kasha, put on display for any man with a few coins to enjoy." I scoffed inwardly. The wife is never as tempting as the mistress, and the mistress never as thrilling as the one you steal. Men, always chasing novelty. He already had his pure white moon in Trista, yet he still wanted to taste something darker, even if it meant humiliating me to get it. He was so certain I would fall to my knees and beg. He was like a starving dog in winter, dangling a piece of juicy meat, just waiting for me to lunge. "If your highness were to spend the night here," I said, my voice steady, "wouldn't Lady Trista be displeased? What does her pleasure matter? I am the prince. My favor is a gift I bestow as I see fit." A gift. He wasn't even king yet, and already he believed his whims were law. Alaric's hands were on me then, pushing me back. In that split second, a flash of steel. From my sleeve, I drew a small, sharp dagger and slashed across the back of his hand. "Kasha," he roared, his face contorted with rage. He grabbed a fistful of my hair and threw me to the ground. My body ached from the impact, but the assault stopped. "I gave you a chance," he seethed, cradling his bleeding hand. "Don't blame me for what comes next." He stormed out of the east wing as abruptly as he had come. I stared at the blood on my dagger, filled with a single burning regret. I hadn't paid more attention to Damien's weapons training. A few inches higher, and I could have ended his line for good. That night, the food sent to my rooms was nothing but watery broth and stale bread. Everyone in the palace knew. The princess was finished. The decree for my family's ruin came swiftly. When my father failed to produce 100,000 silver pieces within a month, the king's guard sealed our estate. My parents were thrown out onto the street. I was stripped of my title and expelled from the prince's residence, left to await the final verdict on our family's fate once our hidden wealth was confiscated. What they didn't expect was this. After hours of ransacking the Valerius estate, smashing furniture and tearing up floorboards, they found not a single coin. My parents and I stood by and watched them destroy our home. The place we had lived for decades was reduced to splinters and rubble. I sighed, a genuine pang of loss hitting me. My mother put an arm around me, trying to comfort me. My inner voice, however, was cheering. Yes, they're not going to find a single piece of gold. The king is going to have their heads for this incompetence. My mother glanced at me, a flicker of a smile on her lips, and swallowed whatever comforting words she was about to say. For now, the king hadn't exiled us. What was the point of exiling a family if you couldn't get their money? The official in charge of the raid was furious, ordering his men to smash everything that was left. The crowd of onlookers began to laugh. I've never seen a seizure like this. They're turning a perfectly good manor into a ruin. Valerius' family were good people. Others give out charity for a day, they gave out soup all winter. And they always gave gifts to the neighborhood kids on holidays. You don't find nobles like that anymore. Maybe that's just the way of the world. Good people don't last. I got a silver piece from their daughter when she became princess. Alaric, who was overseeing the operation, grew darker and darker. "Find it," he snarled. "Tear the whole place down to the foundation if you have to." He couldn't believe it. Kasha was always draped in gold and jewels, yet her family home was apparently empty. He turned to the crowd. "This family is corrupt. They are traitors. You have all been deceived by them." But the crowd's murmuring didn't stop. What do we care? They didn't steal from us. They gave us money. I don't see any of those honorable nobles doing anything for us. Parents and I were placed under heavy guard. That night, a figure slipped into our holding cell and quietly unlocked the door. Under the escort of Lord Marshal Gideon and a squad of his men, my parents and I were smuggled out of the city. My father, ever the scholar, was terrified. "It's a good thing I gave that guard captain a gold coin earlier," he whispered. "Otherwise, we never would have made it out so quietly." Mother and I, however, were giddy with excitement. Tomorrow they'll find we've vanished, disappeared into thin air. They can't admit they let us escape. They'll probably announce we were executed in secret. When we return, the shock will kill them. Lord Marshal was silent for the entire journey. I was burning with curiosity. In the story, he was Trista's devoted backup. How had my brother managed to flip him? My inner gossip columnist was working overtime. Isn't he supposed to be pinning for Trista? What's he doing with us? My mother leaned close and whispered in my ear. His goddess got married, and the illusion shattered. Now he's in love with your brother's young attendant. When Gideon went to stab Damien in the back, the attendant jumped in the way and took the blade for him. Now the great Lord Marshal is in his groveling for forgiveness era. I gasped. That attendant of my brother was indeed a handsome, pretty-faced young man. Who knew the Lord Marshal's trip to the frontier would lead to a journey of self-discovery? A few days after our rendezvous, my father and my very much alive brother, Damien, surrounded Ethelgard with an army of several thousand loyal soldiers. Damien was outside, cleaning up the last remnants of the royal guard, while I, my father, and my mother walked into the royal palace, escorted by Lord Marshal Gideon. The king trembled on his throne. How could you treacherous wolves? Before my father could land the satisfying final blow, the old king simply clutched his chest and expired right there on his throne. That left only Trista and Prince Alaric, huddled behind a dwindling number of guards, looking like cornered rats. Alaric, oblivious to the new reality, was still shouting. This is treason, rebellion, the world will curse your names. This time, my parents and I all laughed. The world curses rulers who hold power but let their people starve, I said, stepping forward. For you, what have you ever done for the people? Besides squeezing them for every last coin, tell me, what good have you done? When we parade you through the streets, do you think they will throw flowers at you? Or rotten eggs? Alaric's face went from white to red, but he remained defiant. I have done many things for the kingdom. As he fell silent, awaiting his judgment, Trista couldn't accept it. Her hair was a mess, her jewels askew. She stared at me, her eyes wild. I've seen the story, I'm the protagonist. The prince and the Lord Marshal were both supposed to be in love with me. You're just a villain, a side character. How can you win? Now this was interesting, so Trista knew the plot too. No wonder she'd been so brazen, but a plot is just a plot. People are people, I sneered at her. When the villain finds out the plot, it's like a mouse in a cheese shop. We can do whatever we want. You, on the other hand, should probably start getting used to your new reality. Bit her lip, refusing to surrender. Then she saw the Lord Marshal enter the room, and her eyes lit up. She fluttered toward Gideon like a moth to a flame. Save me, she pleaded. It was always you I loved. Take me away from here. Could see that Gideon had allied himself with the new regime and now held significant military power. If there was any pity left in his heart for her, she might escape her fate. She remembered the story. How Gideon had found a stand-in for her, how he would drop everything to come to her aid. Here she was, pale and fragile, a damsel in her darkest hour. A hero had appeared. The timing was perfect. All she needed was for him to take her away. Prince laughed, a broken, bitter sound. Trista, after everything I did for you, you throw yourself at another man the first chance you get. She had been the icon of purity and grace in Ethelgard. Seeing her now, groveling at another man's feet, was the final disillusionment for the prince. The woman he had worshipped had become just as common and desperate as everyone else. So much for the noble spirit in her poetry. The prince grabbed her, pulling her into a rough embrace. I'll tell you this, Trista. If I'm going to die, you are going to die with me. She struggled, her eyes still fixed pleadingly on the Lord Marshal. Save me! You said you would love me for the rest of your life. But Gideon didn't move a muscle. Why would you assume, he said, his voice flat, that I would risk offending the new king for a woman? Besides, he added, who even are you? I might have had a crush on you once, but did you really think you could play me for a fool forever? He spoke with righteous indignation, but his eyes kept darting toward my brother's side. Love makes you blind. A broken heart, it seems, helps you see. The former white moon of his heart was now just a pile of dust and broken promises. Lord Marshal Gideon personally seized both Trista and the prince, dragging them away. No matter how much Trista begged or how loudly the prince cursed, their fates were sealed. My father sat on the throne, shifting uncomfortably from side to side. I never realized being king would be so uncomfortable. This chair is as hard as a rock. I ran my hand over the carved wood. It is. The chairs in our old house were much better. A shame they smashed them all to bits. Father grinned. That's nothing. Our private fortune is far larger than the royal treasury. I'll have a new throne forged from solid gold. "This whole palace needs a renovation," he added. "It's far too drab." We're busy making plans until the evening banquet. I can't believe how smoothly everything went, I marveled. My mother laughed heartily. It's all thanks to you knowing the plot. When you were a baby, we could hear your thoughts. It scared us half to death. Your brother stopped playing with his friends entirely and spent all his time training and reading. Damien scratched his head, blushing. Listening to you was terrifying. It gave me serious childhood trauma. My face burned. I whispered, "You could all hear my inner thoughts." They answered in unison, "Of course. We knew every time you skipped your lessons, every time you got into a fight with another noble girl, and every time you silently called someone out for being a treacherous snake. But your father has a soft spot for you," my mother added. "He always looked the other way. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. It was mortifying." "So," my father concluded, "we knew none of us had a good ending. We started planning years ago. We knew we needed our own power. I saved a lot of money. I wasn't about to let those idiots get their hands on it." Mother nodded. "Exactly. Why should our lives be in someone else's hands? When it's a choice between us dying or them dying, the choice is very simple." It turned out that because of me, my family had been on the path of true villainy from the very beginning. And there was no turning back. Trista was thrown in prison. After a lifetime of curating a flawless reputation, not a single person came to visit her. But in the end, she hadn't committed any real crimes. After a few days, she was released. She became a commoner. Her poetry, her grace, her noble sensibilities, all useless now. She had to roll up her sleeves and learn how to make tofu from the old woman down the street. I saw her once, years later, when I was visiting the city. She had married a simple man and was no longer the ethereal muse of Ethelgard. Instead, she was hawking her tofu in the market square, living a plain but prosperous life. The prince tried to incite a rebellion, but with no money, no influence, and a terrible personality, no one would help him. He was beheaded that autumn. The common people didn't care who sat on the throne. They only cared if their bellies were full and if there was peace in the land. 10 years later, the soup given out at the royal charity kitchens no longer had sand in it. Extra, I was a transmigrator from birth. The moment I arrived, I was greeted by my new, enthusiastic family. "Father, Mother, it's a girl." I blinked my eyes open to a world of gold and glittering jewels. But before the wealth could blind me, I recognized them. My new family were all the major villains from the book I'd just finished reading. Damien. "Don't you dare hold your sister like that. You'll drop her." I couldn't speak yet, only gurgle. Damien thought I was reaching for him and swooped me into his arms. The bloodthirsty, tyrannical general from the book was acting like an overeager puppy. "Let me hold her just for a second." "Ugh, this moron is my brother." Damien's arms went stiff. My father took me from him. "See, I knew you couldn't be trusted. You're too clumsy." This father was incredibly handsome, but his ending was so tragic. Oh, how I wished I could speak. "This is the great traitor, father." The supervillain dad, as he held me, my father's hands trembled slightly. He rubbed his ear. Had he just heard a tiny, milky voice?